I would like to begin by paying my respects and acknowledging the traditional owners of this land and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And I would also like to pay my respects to all the elders who are attending this forum today. I would like to now read the Monash Interfaith Gathering Prayer. Almighty Creator, guide the Monash Interfaith Gathering to be a true collaborative representation of various faiths and beliefs. Show us how to become a committed group, working together towards understanding, respect, dignity, and justice for all citizens in our community. Keep us single-minded to defend the rights of each individual to practice and celebrate their own religion and respect the rights of others to hold their chosen beliefs or non-beliefs. Help us build bridges between people of all faiths and beliefs within the community of Monash, so that all of us attain a peaceful and fruitful coexistence. Amen. I would now like to introduce our hardworking secretary, Heather Straftrom, who will be the MC for this forum tonight. Over to you, Heather.
Thank you, Seti, and thank you everybody for coming. It's going to be a special night. I have the great pleasure of introducing Manpreet Kaur Singh. Manpreet was educated, and she was born and educated in India and completed a postgraduate degree in journalism, advertising and public relations. Manpreet has won many awards and she's been a broadcaster with SBS for 28 years. And she's worked on all platforms of journalism, newspapers, radio, magazines, television, and online. A while back, Manpreet produced a documentary, The Enemy Within, which investigated family violence in the Australian Indian community. And it won 6 national and international awards and earned her a coveted Walkley nomination. Currently, Manpreet is manager for SBS's overseeing the editorial output of 8 language programs. That's pretty impressive, Manpreet. Apart from working at SBS, Manpreet has written many articles to build the identity of Punjabi and Indian migrants in Australia and making Australian and the Punjabi community more aware of the numerous contributions that Punjabis of the past and present have made to this country. With Manpreet's passion and concern to stop family violence, particularly against women, we're delighted to have your willingness to share your insights with us this evening. Manpreet tells us that she's happy to make this an interactive session. Talking for 40 minutes is a long time. So she's going to keep an eye on the chat box. And if you'd like to make a comment or add something, put your name so that she's not speaking to odd initials. And if you want to write a comment, and if it's appropriate, she'll respond at the time or she'll address it later. If you would like to speak, Joe's going to change the settings so that you can turn on your video and your chat. So pop your questions in the chat box, and welcome, Manpreet.
Thank you so much, Heather, and to the entire Monash Interfaith group. It is my absolute pride and privilege and honor to be here. As Heather, you mentioned, I've been part of SBS for almost a lifetime. I've always, when I was broadcasting, begun my broadcast with Sat Sri Akal, Salam, and Namaskar. So I'd like to do the same, acknowledging the differences that are amongst us and also the commonalities in the people that are amongst us. So thank you very much for the warm welcome. And can I say how delighted I am that so many of you have made the effort of coming together to kick off the 16 days of activism to end gendered violence in this world. I think there's such an honorable cause, and you've all given up your time for it. I salute you for it. As you all would well be aware that we start the 16 days of activism next Thursday on the 25th of November, which is also the day proclaimed by the United Nations for the elimination of violence against women and children. It goes for 16 days, finishes up on the 10th of December on Human Rights Day. So it's not just about women, children. This is human rights that we're talking about. And I absolutely salute each one of you for making sure that you are not remaining silent, that you are speaking up just by being here. I would like to begin with some disclaimers. As Heather has kindly said, yes, I'm a journalist, a career journalist, but what I'm not an expert by any yardstick. I'm not a social worker. I can't call myself a community leader or a faith leader for that matter. I bring to this room just lived experience of speaking to, I would say, dozens or scores of, I would say, very brave survivors of violence. And I would also say some families of those who unfortunately did not survive the violence, weren't lucky enough to escape it. So I bring that kind of an experience of having spoken to a lot of people, having that lived experience of hearing those stories, telling those stories to a wide audience out there, and also of speaking to experts or legal experts, social workers, politicians, lawmakers, authorities, especially law enforcement authorities. So I just wanted to make it very clear that I'm coming from the standpoint of someone who's been reporting on this and don't claim to be an expert at all. Yes, but what, and also, if I may add, the views that I will express today will be those entirely of myself or those that I've gathered while I've been working for SPS, but they do not form the views of SPS. So please.
Manpreet, your screen has frozen. Oh, you're right.
Misconstrued. That said, who am I? Is just a traditional name that I have, which has a beautiful meaning. Kaur, let me tell you, Kaur is usually the name, a middle name or a surname that most Sikh women would have. I belong to the Sikh faith. So I think I should tell you that Kaur means actually princess. So any woman who has that name is a princess. And Singh, you must have seen that name very often. Singh actually means lion. Almost every person from the Sikh community will have that either middle name or surname. So I'm very proud to say I'm the Lion Princess. So if there's nothing else that you take from today, do take this fact that in Sikhism, women have this name Kaur and men have this name Singh. I'm just greedy, I've took both of them and I'm the Lion Princess. The other thing I should, because this is an interfaith forum, I think maybe I should start here because Sikhism, the faith that I come from, is the 5th largest religion in the world. And the latest census, and if Joe could just kindly show us the next slide. The last census that we had in 2016, we still don't have the data from the 2021 census. This shows us clearly that even in Australia, Sikhism is the 5th largest religion in the country. And I must also tell you that the founder of the Sikh religion is Guru Nanak. And it's a wonderful thing that tomorrow is actually Guru Nanak's birthday. It's a very special day. So it's like Christmas for the Sikh community that is coming tomorrow. And for me, if I can just share one teaching from Guru Nanak, one of his utterances, back in the 15th or 16th century, he said about women, and I think it's very pertinent because of the topic that we are discussing today. Guru Nanak said the words, "So kyo manda akhiye jit jamme rajan." That translates into, why would you look down upon women? They are the ones who give birth to kings. Now, this was said 6 centuries ago, 600 years ago. But it pains me that today, in the 21st century, we are still talking about ways to prevent violence against women and children. I wish I did not have to spend this time talking, advocating for an end to violence against women. But I think the pandemic levels that violence has taken form, especially in Australia, it is important that we talk about it. And I'm grateful to the Monash Interfaith group for affording me this opportunity to talk about it, because it almost seems like even 16 days of activism is not enough. I think every day needs to be a day of activism to end this gendered violence. As we go on, I will tell you a little bit more about it. But just pegging back to the faith communities, I thought it is important because Australia is such a cultural melting pot of different religions. I believe faith communities have a very, very important role to play in this field, especially in the sphere of trying to bring some common sense into people of faith to ensure that we counter this prevalence in the society that, you know, so many women and children are violated. Men are too, but we know that a majority of women and children are the ones who are the victims. So I think it's really important, knowing full well that we have very fast growing faith communities like Islam and Buddhism and Hinduism and Sikhism. These, I believe, faith leaders from all of these communities and yourselves can come forward, can come together, and we can move, try and do something about this scourge, or about this pandemic, really, a pandemic that nobody has spoken about for centuries now, but it's really about time that we did something about it. So Joe, if you could just move to the next slide, I could just begin talking about the discussion that we have today. And as we said earlier, if you have anything at all to add to this conversation, if you have any comment, feel free to write in the chat box, because I would love to hear from you. In fact, it would be nice if we can unmute you and hear your words or vision or your thoughts as well, because probably a 40-minute monologue will really, really bore you, and I don't want that. I want all of us to be engaged. I want all of us to be talking together and looking for solutions. So where I come from, I'm a journalist. I ask the questions. I look for answers. And today I'm looking for answers from all of you, and I would love for all of you to participate as best as you can. And I'd like to say thank you to Shashiji. I can see there's a message in the chat box saying it's really good to bring this topic under the microscope. Thank you, Shashiji, and I'm looking forward to your insight in that of all the attendees tonight. Okay, let's talk family and domestic violence. In us, and only then can we move forward. And why do we need to do this? Because unfortunately, family and domestic violence is something that does not discriminate. It happens across the board, across every nationality, across every religious background, every age, every level of education. It's not as if someone's highly educated and they may not be abused. It's not that just the illiterate women or children or men, for that matter, would be abused. It's not if someone is employed versus unemployed. It happens across the board. And even when we look at a country like Australia, which is a migration nation, it would be easy to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, maybe new migrants bring that kind of mentality. But no, it's across the board. It's there across the communities. So there's no hiding from it. No one is worse off or no one's better off. All of us are in this together. The very, very sad statistics are that 1 in 3 Australian women has experienced either physical and or sexual violence from the age of 15. Isn't that something? 15 is a child, as far as I'm concerned. And to be subjected to that from a young age, 1 in 3, that's a very big number for women alone. The other statistic that I want to talk to you about is that domestic violence and family violence is the leading driver of homelessness in women in Australia. It's also attributed to be costing us $21.7 billion. But if we look at the actual toll, look at our hospitals. 10 women every day are admitted with serious injuries because of physical violence that they've endured at the hand of a partner or a spouse. Even worse, on average, 1 woman is killed every week by her current or former partner. Now, these are not just statistics. These are real human beings. These are real people with families and children and others connected to them. That's the reason why this involves all of us. This could be our friends, our relatives, could be us, could be our children. That's the reason why this impacts each one of us. None of us is immune. Joe, if you could get to the next slide. We're talking about statistics, but it's a lot more than that. Heather mentioned the enemy within. That came around 2012 is when I made that audio documentary. But much before that, around 2006, is when I actually started talking about family violence in our communities. And I feel strongly about it because of how the community reacted initially when I started to talk about it. I think there was a very adverse reaction from our community that, hey, it's a private matter. Why are you talking about this on the airwaves? Why are you talking about publicly on the radio? It's a personal matter. Or why are you, washing the community's dirty laundry in public? That is the other thing people feel very upset about. But I have to say, it's the bravery of the survivors that I spoke to that kept me going, that made me feel that if even one woman is inspired to tell her story, to come forward, to report her violence and abuse to the police, it's worth talking about this. So let me tell you an anecdote. It's a real, this is what actually happened back in 2006. I had this young lady who came into my office, very brave, and I did this interview with her. And she told me, living in Australia, she had been locked up in her room for the last 11 months. She had never been allowed out by her husband. And then she told me that every time, for her, it was almost normal, that You know, the woman doesn't leave without the husband, and she can be locked away every time the husband leaves. And she told me that one instance, even today, when I think back, I get goose pimples. Because she said there was the first time that he became actually violent, because until now, the controlling behavior she kind of condoned. And she said, I have no one else here. He's my only family member. So she relied on him. She depended on him. But the one day that he got really upset, I think it was about cooking. Some food wasn't cooked properly or something. And he was really upset with her. And she narrated to me how the man actually brought an aerosol can in the kitchen, sprayed her from head to toe, lit a matchstick and got close to her. I froze when she told me. I think my listeners froze when they heard that.
Manpreet, you're frozen.
Can't hear you. Is your sound on?
Sound is on.
Yep, that's it. You're right.
You can hear me. Oh, that's a pity. I don't know how much you heard, but I'll keep moving on. So that really was a catalyst for me as a journalist to ensure that I tell these stories of women who are being persecuted quietly, silently at home, to ensure that they don't remain silent. In fact, the title of that documentary was Silence is Deadly. And that did become a finalist at the United Nations Award for Prevention of Violence Against Women. We didn't win it, but that's okay. It got some recognition. And I think that's what got me started. And The Enemy Within, that came in 2012. And I think for me, it was really important to look at the reasons behind the violence. What had happened was, in a matter of about 3 to 4 months, in just the Victorian Indian community, we lost 11 lives. And this is women, children, and men, all, either by murder or by suicide, and all related to family violence. The narratives that came out in the mainstream media was, oh, it's the Indian culture. Oh, it's because arranged marriages, or it's because it's dowry, or it's because, you know, we all have assumptions. And unfortunately, that doesn't help. And to me, it really upset me because, hey, I'm a product of an arranged marriage. I'm okay. And not everybody has to go through a dowry system. All of that happens. That actually inspired me to start talking to not just survivors of violence, but also to experts, to law enforcers, to lawyers, to magistrates, to understand what really is at, you know, beneath all of this, and how do we peel the layers, you know, of this awful, awful onion, if I can call it. How do we, you know, get some semblance of understanding into it? And to me, what I learned were 2-3 simple things. Family violence is caused purely by an imbalance of power. It's basically a power control, a struggle to control power. It's also caused in new migrants with settlement issues, because they come here leaving the familiar environment into a new country, trying to find their feet, financial hardships and all of that. That's probably one of the things that does cause the tension of trying to settle into a new country. I'm not saying it's the only cause. It could be alcohol abuse. It could be so many other things. But to me, that was another thing that came out strongly. And of course, the visa issues. a lot of the people, if they're dependent on their partner or spouse, on their ability to stay in this country, can actually be impacted by that violence as well. So those are the few things I learned. But the biggest thing I learned was, I think, a majority in our community do not know the definition of family violence, do not understand what constitutes family violence. I'm happy to pause here before I jump into the next slide in case somebody wants to interact or say something. I can see a message from Kamla Reddy over here to say that we've been talking about domestic violence for a while now. 10 people in hospital every day, 1 killed every week. Clearly the strategies are not working. Kamla, do you want to say something about it? What's topmost in your head? Or do you want to type it up, or do you want to say it? Maybe Joe can unmute you.
Yes, thanks, Manpreet. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, it is quite sort of shocking. You know, like I was quite aware that this is a problem which is very widespread in the community at the moment. And it is not confined to any particular, you know, socio-economic group or cultural group. It's widespread. And, you know, as a member of one of like a school that I'm teaching in, I had a very good big hand in organizing a domestic violence day, you know, like making the people aware of the extent of this particular problem a couple of years back. And we had a lot of people from the community coming and addressing the people who had gathered. So what you know is very surprising to me is that happened a couple of years ago, and we are constantly talking about it. And every year, you know, during November, we do have a domestic violence sort of awareness day, and we hope to see that there is some headway being made in order to address this. But you know, the figures that you just produced now, actually I was quite unaware that there were 10 women who end up in the hospital every day and 1 killed every week.
Yeah, it is quite an eye-opener.
Stand up, and we really have to relook at what is being done, and whatever is being done is simply not making any difference. It's about time. That's what I wanted to say.
And the first step is speaking up, which you're doing. And I think this needs to lead to brainstorming. And I think that's exactly what we need to do at the end of this session. So thank you, Kamla. That's such a valuable contribution.
Could I add something, Manpreet?
Yes.
I come from Sri Lanka. I was under a dowry system and a proposed marriage. My marriage was successful. This domestic violence is not only to Southeast Asians. Correct. It is everywhere, even in Australia, among Australians, any society. It is widespread. We cannot pinpoint to one society. And I think, Kamla, there's a lot of work being done, but I think more have to be done. It's up to us. But a lot of work is being done. I'm aware of that. But still much more to be done to stop it. But that's my answer. It's common to everybody. It's not only to one society.
You are spot on. You're spot on, Siti. Exactly what Heather has written in the chat box here. Domestic violence does not discriminate between religions, caste, or society. It is a common enemy. That thread runs across every single community, whether they came 2 years ago or 200 years ago.
That was my comment that Heather put it on. But yeah, so it's common to everybody.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And that's exactly where I started. And I can't emphasize enough that no one is better off. No one is worse off. We're all in this together, regardless of our backgrounds, regardless of our education, regardless of our culture or their nationality. But we can keep pressing on, if that's okay. Dilnaz, I think, would like to speak. There is a
yes,
message.
Thank you. I'm like Doctor Who. I don't have a face for this conference, but I hope you all can hear me. Sat Sri Akal,
Yes.
Manpreet, and good wishes for Guru Nanak Jayanti. I'm going to the Gurdwara tomorrow to celebrate with our Sikh friends. So looking forward
lovely.
to getting out and eating at the beautiful langar, which is the lovely food that is served by the sevaks, that's the volunteers in the Gurdwara. But coming to this subject, what I think is important is that we have to empower our women. We do need to be able to give them the strategies to, whether it's bystander training or whether it's other forms of empowerment, to be able to speak up. That's what I think we need to do moving forward.
Absolutely, Dilnaz. That's one part of it. And I think we need to empower our men as well. It's not just the women. The men need the training, the women need the training. All of us are in it together. And you're spot on. We need to empower women. We need to let them know that, yes, they are in control. We'll talk about that a little bit later down the track. If I can just share some other information with you before that. Joe, would you be kind to just go to the next slide? Thank you. As I was referencing, I think the biggest thing we can do for all of our communities, even people who are long settled here, or if they're a new migrant or whether they've been here for a long, long time, a lot of people just tend to think violence is just physical. Violence only occurs if someone is hurt physically, but that's not true. It's not true, because there are so many forms of violence recognized by the law in Australia. I'm only going to touch upon a couple here. And why I wanted to do that was I just wanted to illustrate some stories so you know that these are real stories. And I've taken them, all of these cases, as I want to call them, case studies from the Enemy Within. If it gets too graphic, let me know, but I will tell you as factually as possible. If you can just go back, Joe, to the previous one. So physical violence, we're all familiar with that. That's where physical violence actually takes place. I'd like to tell you about this case of Sargun Ragi. She was a young bride who came to Australia in 2011. And there were differences between the husband and the wife. And what happened was that she developed an extramarital affair, which the husband was not happy about at all. His response was to actually lock her up, as I was mentioning earlier to you, to not let her have access to her phone, not let her have access to finances, and just to punish her physically. He raped her. And marital rape is another thing that is not often talked about. It went through to an intervention order. The judge actually granted her an intervention order and removed her to a safe house. Despite that, the husband was able to find out the address. Within a couple of months, he was able to trace her. He found her, brutally killed her, and killed himself and set the house afire. That happened right here in Melbourne. The second case was that of Manpreet Kaur, my namesake. She was in Sydney. She was married to another young man. Again, marital issues took place, got to a stage where it completely got out of hand. They used to have issues. They had a lot of verbal argy-bargy, as we call it here in Australia, to no avail. Manpreet's sister lived here in Sydney as well, kept telling her, we need to do something about it. Go to the police, report him to the police. But a lot of women don't do that. They're just not able to go and report their husband to the police. It's just something that they can't do. And it got to the stage where this one night, he just totally lost her mind. I heard Manpreet's sister describe this to me in very graphic details, how he stabbed her 22 times on her torso, 8 times on her face. did not even bother to see whether she lived or not and reported it, right? So this is obviously a very overt form of physical violence, which a lot of us think is the only form of domestic violence. But beyond this, there are many, many other forms of violence. And I really want to tell you about that too. Because often we don't understand the emotional violence that's perpetrated on women. Constantly putting someone down, constantly saying, you're not good enough, or you can't do this. X is better than you. Y can do that better than you. You're no good. I remember this young lady who we gave the pseudonym of Aarti in The Enemy Within. Her words to me were, I wish she'd actually hit me. I wish actually I had a scar to show someone. Because when I try and explain to somebody that he's hurting me emotionally, no one understands. So at some levels, emotional violence is even more abusive because you've got no scars to show, you've got no wounds to show. It hurts as deeply, and I want everyone to recognize how hard it is to deal with that. Then there is also financial violence, that a woman is not given money, deprived of money, of basic necessities. And we had Arzu's case in, again, Enemy Within, where sadly her husband had died. It is her parents-in-law who started to control the money and would not give any of the husband's money to the wife and child. And that's another way that violence can happen. And I do want to mention economic violence because back in 2019, at the end of a long Senate inquiry, we now have economic abuse added to the definition of violence in Australia, that this is a dowry abuse or economic abuse is a form of family violence in Australia. I would encourage everybody, all of you over here, to please look at all forms of violence and be able to recognize each form of it and to be able to advocate to everybody else that, hey, this is not acceptable. This behavior is violence in Australia. Next slide, Joe. I'll keep moving right along. I really should be going much faster. I'm looking at the time and oh my God. Okay, now's the time I should not have laughed because this is one thing that has stayed with me throughout. I did this interview 8 years ago with Detective Superintendent Rod Joning from Victoria Police. And according to his statistics, he told me a majority of assaults against women happen within the family home. This is his exact quote. The fact that a woman or a child is less safe at home in their home environment than they are on the street is a very, very damaging thing. And I really want all of us to pause for a second. That our police force is spending a majority of its time trying to keep peace in our homes. Is that where we are as a community, as a society? This to me is such a hair-raising thing that women are safer on the street than they are at home. And I think it's something that should galvanize all of us to action. Next slide, please, Joe. I think I'll have to race through now. I did collect some data for you, and perhaps we can share this data with everybody later. I just wanted to say, we talked about these things years and years ago, just like you were saying, you've been talking about this every year, but something needs to be done. I was hoping that 10 years later, 8 years later, there would be some change. Unfortunately, the pandemic has made it even worse. Whilst on the one side, data tells us that property crimes have come down, break-ins have come down, motor vehicle thefts have come right down. But family violence and sexual assault went up 13% in 2020 during the pandemic. This was much, much more. 13% is obviously way more than 2%. Between 2018 and 2019, the increase was 2%, but from 2019 to 20, it was 13%. 2 in 5 victims of sexual assault were family violence related. And hear this, almost 3/4 of the assault victim survivors were aged under 19. They're kids, they're teenagers. And that really, really hurts to see. Next slide, please. To me, these are not just numbers. These tell very big stories. All of us need to be aware that what is happening here is just beyond the realms of understanding. So the next slide will show you, Joe, could I please have that? Between 1993 and 2020, look at the difference. In 1993, out of 100,000 people, there were 69 assault victims. But in 2020, we have 107 victims per 100,000. You tell me, is this progress? What is happening to us as a society? Most victims were female. Almost half were aged under 15. Most sexual assaults were reported to the police within the year, which always happens. But these are the 2 key statistics. 66% of the assaults happened within the residential home, and 95% did not involve a weapon. I mean, when we think of violence, we think of guns and weapons. Not true. This is violence. This stares us at the face. That's the reason why we need to do more about it. Next slide, please, Joe. The statistics that you just saw did not actually include Victoria. That's the reason why I've got a couple of slides just to talk about Victoria. We have increased every year in Victoria, year on year. You can see in 2017, we had 76,000 cases. 2018, again, a little more than 76. 2019, 82,000. 2020, 88,000. And 2021, this year, 93,440 cases in 1 year. These are family violence incidents just this year. And I want to say to you, when you break down that 93,440 cases, that is 256 cases a day. That is 10 every hour. That's 1 every 6 minutes. That's the reason why this is a crisis. This is bigger than a pandemic. Next slide, please. To me, the numbers tell one side of the story. We all, as human beings, recognize that it's more than just the numbers. These are real lives being lost again and again. And how often do we hear, if we don't learn from history, if we don't learn from the past, how will we rectify our future? I also wanted to take a moment to show you that, yes, women are the majority of victims and survivors, but men also do suffer. This chart tells you about 1/3 or 1/4 of the victims or survivors, if you want to call them, of family violence, and this is just for Victoria. They're men. Like women, the biggest age group where the biggest impact is seen is between 20 and 54 years of age. And that's really sad. That's a prime of life that's being lost to family violence. Next slide, please, Joe. I did put together some data because we've spoken at length about the violence against women. 1 in 3 women are impacted, but 1 in 6 men are also impacted. Sorry, 1 in 16, I got that wrong. 1 in 16, that is 0.5 million men have experienced physical or sexual violence by a partner from the age of 15 again. And when we talk of deaths, we spoke about 1 woman being killed every week. We have 1 man killed per month by a current or former partner. And this was over a 2-year period. That's the last statistic I had. That's the reason why I embarked after The Enemy Within. And I would encourage you to go to our website, just give you the names of the dowry trap and the price of marriage and divorce, where we spoke about male victims of violence, how men are terribly impacted as well, and the way it manifests for them, what we can do to help them. Because to me, it's a human rights issue. At the end of the day, violence when it's perpetrated is violence.
Can you repeat that last
Joe,
sentence?
I don't know if you...
Repeat the last
Sorry?
sentence. Repeat the last sentence.
Okay.
Please.
Okay. All I said at the end was that violence, whether it's perpetrated against a woman, a child, or a man, is violence. And that's what we need to call it out as. It is violence. And that's the reason why it is our duty for all of us to speak up. And I feel people of faith from interfaith communities have a huge role to play in all of this. In many of the cases that I have spoken, the victims or survivors that I've spoken to, they did approach their faith communities. They did approach the temple, try to seek help. Unfortunately, the priests were not aware of Australian law, did not know
Frozen.
how to guide the people. I know train priests, and I think that's a great way to go forward. So, Joe, if there is another slide, we can just move to the next. I do want to quickly talk about this, and then we can leave it here. We won't play the video. It's fine. If you can just, just indulge with me for 2 minutes more. We've talked about the impact on, victims who suffer violence, whether they're women or men or children. I also want to bring the perspective of a journalist over here. And maybe we can share that video around later if you want to see it. That was part of Our Watch. Our Watch is I would call it the peak body in Australia that looks at elimination of violence, and we look at ethical reporting of family violence in all the media outlets. And I've been in the media advisory group with them. And I did a video with them talking about vicarious trauma. Let me explain that to you. As a journalist, I'm not a professional. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a social worker. But just hearing hundreds of these stories, it's a lot of emotional burden for me to carry as well as a reporter. And then you try and dissociate yourself when you tell these stories to other people, but it is hard. So that is one aspect of what a journalist goes through. The other aspect is, and being a female journalist, I can tell you, many of the perpetrators of violence did not like a female journalist covering the stories where their wives got a voice, that the wives were able to speak up, or ex-wives were able to give their views and call out the violence. And I can tell you that it has been hard for me because I've had to, get some kind of protection from myself just for doing my job. There was a good period of one year, I can tell you, that I was getting very clear threats just for covering violence. And for me to be able to finish my work, walk alone to my car, being safe. And I think it's really important for all of you here to hear that as well, that we as journalists try and do our best, but we are not immune from unknown perpetrators who we have nothing to do with at all. I mean, I don't have a relationship with them, but we can also become victims of that in one sense. So the time's really run away, so I'm going to have to stop here. I did want to share a little bit more with you, but I think I've given you a little bit of overview of what I wanted to share with you, why it's important for all of us not to stay silent, why it's important for each one of us to speak to our families, to speak to our children especially, our friends, our neighbors, our communities. To me, at the end of the day, a safe home makes a safe community, makes a safe society and a safe country. Each one of us has to take that initiative and ensure that we are maintaining the peace and safety within our home and not asking the police to do that. That absolutely is the way to do it. So let's keep talking about this. Let's keep coming up with the ideas that will actually work. And let's ensure that men and women both partner in this and try to eliminate the scourge from society. I think I'll leave that there, Joe and Heather.
Thank you. A wonderful talk, Manpreet. Thank you. A lion princess. I love that idea. It takes a lot of courage to speak up as you have. And I think it's raised a lot of questions that may come up in the discussion later of what we can do about our boys and girls in raising them. So let's have the discussion going much later with Emma. Thank you. Now we're going to introduce Ruby Lampard. I met Ruby at Kaur House a little while back, and Ruby tells me that she worked in marketing and fundraising. That was her background. And she joined Kaur House about 3 years ago. And she's been just sharing the tale and the important work that they do there. So Ruby, I invite you to turn on your video, and we'd love to hear about Kaur House.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
Hello.
Yes, you can speak now. We can hear you.
I can speak now. Hello, everyone. That was a fantastic talk from Manpreet, very inspiring and so right on the money with the situation of family violence in Australia currently. I'm going to give you a quick overview of Kaur House. Kaur House is currently located in the city of Whitehorse. For 43 years, we've been providing family violence services for women and children impacted by family violence and in need of relocation to ensure their safety. We work with clients no matter their background, so all types of people, all ages, so single women, older women, mothers with children, the LGBTIQ+ community, and in the last year or so, working with people who identify as male. Last financial year, we worked with 438 women and 234 children across 46 different cultural and linguistic backgrounds. 33% of those clients were born overseas. Our core business is providing crisis accommodation in our refuge. So about a third of our clients fall into this category. So we offer clients secure, high security accommodation, as they usually have an active perpetrator looking for them. And these clients stay with us for about 3 to 6 weeks as we stabilise their situation by providing safety planning, case management, liaison with other services and health services, schools, legal support and emotional support. We have a team of family violence practitioners who work to empower our clients and just provide them with the skills to make informed choices about their future. We have a specialist children's practitioner, and she provides trauma-informed programs that prioritises the health and the mental well-being of the children, and again, to get them on the path to a safer future. Many of our clients move on from our refuge after about 3 to 6 weeks into one of our transitional houses, which we have about 25 in the local area. These are all owned by Salvocare, Anglicare, all those sorts of organisations, and we can offer a 3 to 6 month lease, so we can still continue to work with them and then finally secure them some long-term accommodation. We also work with a lot of people in the wider community who are experiencing family violence. So we sort of provide the same supports, emotional support, liaison, all those things that we provide to the women in our refuge. We also work with women and children who are waiting for a place to become available in a refuge like Kaur House. Women are initially put into motels around Melbourne, can often stay there for 2 or 3 weeks before a spot becomes available. So we proactively, every day, we proactively visit women in these motels to start them on their journey with emotional support, material aid like phones, food, toiletries, all those sort of things that they need to get going. Kaur House is a charity. We're a not-for-profit, but our core funding is provided by DHHS, which funds our support practitioners and our core activities, where we need to support all other activities like material aid, specialist services, upkeep of the refuge, school clothing, toys, and we also run a series of community education programs for anybody in the community who's experienced family violence. To do this, we reach out to the community, to individuals, organisations, we apply for grants, and we just really rely on the community to help us provide all these really necessary things. Material aid is incredibly important in the survival journey of abuse victims. Most have fled an abusive situation and arrived with nothing. So immediately we supply them with toiletries, food, clothing, toys, books, and so many other things. And then when they finally move into a stable accommodation, we apply for grants for furniture, and then we practically give them kitchen packs, linen packs, cleaning packs, all that really expensive stuff you need when you set up a home from scratch. We're incredibly excited to announce that we will be welcoming clients to our new development in the city of Monash in early February, I think, at this point. The development will be made up of 6 units and will house about 25 clients. We'll change to providing 24/7 service, which at the moment we have to run that via pager overnight. So it'll be fantastic to be finally on site offering that service. The purpose-built facility is being built by DHHS, and it will include 6 units, a multi-purpose room, play areas, secure meeting spaces, and an office space. We believe it will effectively double our capacity, which will be just amazing, and we will be the only service offering crisis accommodation in the city of Monash. We were still using our existing refuge. We're going to do some work on that and repurpose it into a couple of separate units. So again, we'll be able to provide all those necessary things that we have been doing in the city of Whitehorse. We're a really small organisation, but we have a passionate 43-year history, and we're committed to supporting the rights of women and children to live safely and without fear of violence. It's a great opportunity to meet all of you tonight. It's a really the work that we do is really complex, and we offer support to so many different sorts of people. And as Manpreet just spoke about, it involves all sorts of society, all sorts of people, and we particularly work with people who do not have the family support around them, and they just really need people to step up and give them the help to move forward. So yeah, if anybody's got any questions, I'd love to take questions, or yeah.
That's really important, thank you. And are you funded enough?
The Victorian government is quite amazing, as Manpreet mentioned, that huge amount of money that is poured in both the Victorian government and as well as the Australian government. So the funding and the assistance that we get from the Victorian government is amazing, but obviously supplying all those things is an ongoing job for me and for the staff at Kaur House. But we do get wonderful, wonderful support for people in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, through the Rotary clubs, through the View clubs, we have about 4 or 5 churches that support us, individuals, whatever. So it's great. So we're always looking for more, and you know, this huge undertaking of furnishing the new facility has been really huge, but we're working towards that, and we will be ready to go in February.
It's wonderful work. One of the things we put in the survey is a link to Kaur House. And if anyone would like to donate something, and maybe put MIG at the end of your name so that you can measure the results from what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, because as again, we're a small organisation, so I do see every donation and everything that comes through. So yeah.
And I'm very embarrassed. I was preparing to send the survey out last night, had it all ready, and I sent it out to everybody before the session, so I'll send it again later. So thank you so much, Ruby, for sharing that. And and I'm delighted now to invite Manpreet to run the question and answer for both Manpreet and Ruby. And put your questions in the chat box, and let's open it to everyone. And Joe's going to, it'd be really nice if we could see everybody now. Can we take the slide away, Joe? And everybody can turn on their videos. There's lots of you here, and you can just raise your hand if you want to speak.
I think Shashi has his hand up.
Yeah, okay, Shashi. Thank you. And you're going to have to remember to unmute yourselves.
Oh, perhaps Shashi, because I have a lovely, oh, he's unmuted. Yes.
Can I unmute my...
We can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear also. Yeah, my hands are up for a long time. And I was hoping that I will get a chance to share my experiences also. Now, my first experience goes back to at least 40 years when I first faced the family violence victim and perpetrator, and I tried to help that one. Those days, I realized that our experts, like police, like lawyers, like doctors, they haven't got any idea how the other cultures behave and how to handle them. And that's still the story today. I'm sorry to say that, but that's still the story today. Now, it's nothing to do with the faith communities. If you look at the proportion, 70% people, yes, from the faith background, but 30% no faith background. And people, when go to faith community leaders, they are all educated overseas. They haven't got a clue how the things work in here. And our lawmakers, they only know how the law is made here, but how people practice law in other countries, they haven't got a clue. Like in India, when police or people hasn't got any respect for police, they know that they can buy the police, and they think they can do the same thing here also. And in the beginning, I saw these things with my own eyes. So that's the second thing. Still, we are not able to identify what's causing this problem. Till we don't know what is causing the problem, we can't fix it. Doesn't matter how many $1 trillion we put it in there, but we are not going to see any effect. At this stage, yes, we are teaching the children. I have seen the difference in kindergartens, but when they come home and they get the lessons from their families, from their grandparents, it's absolutely opposite. So till we all start believing we all are humans, We are working for the same cause to make each other happy and to serve each other or serve the humanity. Nothing will change. We all have to work together. We all have to work for a better future for our coming generations and have that bigger objective in front of us.
I don't think there was a question in there, but very valid comments. I agree with everything you said. But you're right.
Thanks for you coming and enlightening us on certain things, and not enlightening only, bringing all these things to the surface where we are discussing all this open and trying to identify. Very early in my management training, I learned if the mosquitoes are coming in the room and you keep spraying this Mortein, yes, you kill those ones, they will keep coming in. So you have to get up, close the window, close the blind, or whatever is there. If you are sitting in a dark, put the light on. So don't complain about the things, do something. We all have to support each other. But no, we are not doing that. We are all worried about our salvation, all going to heaven. Let's others go to hell. Sorry to say that, but that's what the reality is. And I have to become a devil's advocate to say all that. Sometimes I feel upset, but sometimes I feel, and as I said, I noticed that 40 years back, and still those memories, and that person hasn't changed. He's gone through all different things.
Thank you, Sashi. I think Manpreet, would you like to comment on that before we go to Lorena? I think she's got a hand up.
Honestly, I agree with a lot of things he's saying. So I only respect the work that Shashiji does. He goes late at night to police stations to help out women in distress. So I salute him for the work that he does. I wish each one of us to spoke up and did something in our own spheres. The world would be a much better place. I absolutely agree with you.
Thank you. Heather, is it all right for me to take over the questions of the participants? Yes, Heather? Okay, Heather, you are unmute yourself.
I'd be interested to hear more about the dowry trap and price of marriage.
Heather?
Something in my experience.
Heather, can I interrupt? Am I supposed to be in charge of the questions?
You certainly are.
All right. Can we give chance to Lorena? Lorena first, and then after Lorena is Tess, and then you can go in. Okay. Yes, Lorena, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, I just did. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sick, so I apologize if I'm hard to understand. But I guess this kind of, I'm not sure, it's not really a question. I myself am a victim of domestic violence, and I've spent the past 2 years trying to heal by trying to figure out why this happens, basically. And I came across a book by Lundy Bancroft called Why Does He Do That? And Lundy is a men's behavioural change program person. He's been in the business for, I don't know how many years now. At the time of writing his book, and it all comes down to entitlement and society. And that's basically what drives it. So anyone who says, like in my experience, I had the officers ask me what was going on at the time. You know, they were like, oh, did he lose his job? Are you having money problems? And I was just like, look, he's worked maybe 3 months, our whole relationship, and I pay for absolutely everything. What stress does this man have? I do everything. And basically, Lundy Bancroft explains all the different types of abuse. And it really does come down to the fact that for change to happen, we have to stop enabling them with excuses, because when you give these men or perpetrators the excuse, oh, you know, he was just drunk, or, oh, you know, she played a part in it. you're enabling them and you're driving it down. And unfortunately, the court system has a very long way to go, because my ex, I found out through family court proceedings that he has a 20-year history of domestic violence, like 20 years of raping and brutalising multiple women across multiple states of Australia. And he got a $300 fine for giving me a permanent injury.
Thank you, Lorena. We'll let Manpreet respond to that. Would you like to respond to that, Manpreet?
That is so heartbreaking to hear. Absolutely heartbreaking to hear. Unfortunately, not very different to many of the stories I've heard. The biggest thing that really hurts me in all of this, exactly what Lorena is saying, there is no fear of consequences. That's why a lot of perpetrators get away with it, because they don't fear real consequences. And the other problem is victim blaming. We as a society are so good at finding a reason of blaming the victim, or it's because of something she did that must have happened, or it's because this happened, that's why she deserved it, right? So to me, it's a whole mindset change, something that Shashiji was alluding to earlier. We need to go to the source. What is it that lets us condone these things? And if we start to begin to stop it at the source, at our homes, teach our boys and our girls, I think that's a start, and we all have to take ownership of that. Thank you, Lorena. It's very difficult to come out and speak about your own story. I really, really am grateful that you found the strength to do that, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Manpreet. I think Tess had a hand up. Tess, and then after that we can go to Heather.
Hi, thank you for holding this event, and also for allowing me to talk. I actually just wanted to make a comment after the gentleman Shashi spoke, but I just want to acknowledge Lorena's experience and what she must be going through now, and the difficulty and the challenges, and listening to Lorena kind of reverberated with what I wanted to say, which is something obviously that's Shashi touched on. The problem is that we keep trying to put a Band-Aid on this problem, and you cannot put a Band-Aid, because we need to change the way, gender roles and the way men are raised to think that they need to be, act and be a certain way. And you can see how shame and certain other issues can create uncomfortable feelings, and then they may turn to coping strategies that are very unhealthy. So I think the problem does lie in dealing with and addressing these gender roles and these gender norms that we're raised with, and especially culturally. A lot of cultures, your men are taught to be to have power, and I think with that comes a lot of issues. But the challenge which the gentleman did raise was, how do we begin this change process when you've got thousands of years of cultural and even religious indoctrination? I think that's the question that I'd like to ask. How do you begin to change? Because it's a matter of taking responsibility and power out of certain people's possessions and creating equality. But yeah, it's just, how do you start changing these norms that we've been conditioned to live with for so many years?
Would Manpreet want to make a comment on what Tess is saying or asking?
Yeah, very, very quick comment. No culture, no religion condones violence. So to me, that is the one thing that comes out loud and clear. It's the interpretation of it. And it's the way that people empower themselves to use religion as a sword or a shield. Many of us, unfortunately, do that. So to me, it would be a bit lazy, and that's been the bone of my contention, that we cannot blame culture, we cannot blame religion, we cannot blame backgrounds for violence. What we need to do is understand, why is this need to be more powerful than you, to control, to be the one who actually decides whether you breathe or not, whether you go out of home or not, whether you do this or that. So it is an educational change. And I think it's a systemic change across the board. I hear what you're saying, and I don't think you meant it that way, but I just feel very strongly that we should not let anybody say that a particular culture will condone violence. None of them do. Coming from Indian culture, where goddesses are worshipped, right? In that, you should not have any violence against women, if you look at it. But it's the way it is interpreted and misinterpreted. It's really important to cut through that and be able to decondition these people. When I say these people, all of us. We just can't accept it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to apply it to any culture. I mean,
I agree with you.
All of us, sorry, I should have said society as an entirety.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Manpreet, and thank you, Tess. Heather, can you go in next? Heather, you can unmute yourself.
Sure. I see there's a question from for Ruby. Do the victims make payments? You're muted.
Yeah, it's from me, Heather. I just want to ask Ruby whether the victims make a payment towards their lodging.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because most of the people we work with usually do not have financial backing, so they've lost their stream of financial enlightenment or whatever. So we immediately get them on to Centrelink payments, and part of our mantra is we actually charge them a really minimal amount, which is often around the $10 or the $15. But part of that is we need to get them straight away working on their independence, working on, they've got to get their money situation sorted out. We're working with them to do all those sort of things. And then when they move on to that transitional house, it usually goes up to about $30, $40 a week or whatever. But all of it is about them learning to get their budgets going, because it's vitally important that their financial situation is sorted out and there's not that temptation to go back to that relationship, which was where their financial security was, because women on average return to a relationship 7 times, and it's really difficult. Our biggest job is to actually get them not to go back, and that's our biggest job.
Thanks, Ruby.
Thank you, Ruby. I think we have Ehsan and Farouk. You've got your hand up. Yes, you can unmute yourself.
Sure. Thank you for tonight's subject. It's a very important subject. But let me ask a question first, and within that question, I have a comment to make. And that my question is that how hard it is to change a man who is violent, who is showing signs of violence, how hard it is to change a grown-up man into becoming a moderate and loving partner. It must be very difficult, if at all possible. I don't know the statistics, that if there is any statistic to show that how many of the people who've been punished or who've been jailed or have been financially chastised, how many of them really in truth changed their inner being and become a gentle person? It must be extremely difficult. Maybe Manpreet has got statistics for that. But I would also have a comment. I'll let Manpreet to answer that, then I'll have a comment to make.
Ehsan, you've left me speechless. I have no comment, or I don't have statistics for it. But you're right. I think, you know how they say that you can't change the spots on a tiger? I think it's too far gone. You can't expect a person to change or shift their attitudes. But I definitely do feel this is not something you can legislate for. This is not something the police can effect a change. This is not something that law can effect a change. This is a mindset shift that needs to come from within the home, within the family home, from all the generations within the family home. I firmly believe that. No one can, we can write thousands of laws to prevent family violence. It's not going to stop it. Unless we actually make that effort to ensure that our boys and girls, when they're growing up at home, they're not witness to someone putting one partner putting the other partner down. If they see respect at home, I can guarantee you that's the mindset shift that we need to begin. But it has to come from home.
Yes.
How can you legislate to give respect? You can't. Police can't teach you that. A punishment or lockup will not teach you that. Taking away somebody's money or making them pay alimony is not going to teach them that.
Thank you, Manpreet. I think we have Kathy who has got a comment on Farouk's question.
Thank you. What a wonderful session this evening has been. I think Farouk raised a very interesting point, and we need to differentiate between violent people and people who perpetrate violence or abuse on their family members. There tend to be different types of people. A violent person is violent to anybody. People who perpetrate family violence tend to do that within the confines of their families. They don't go and beat up their bosses or their colleagues. They save that privilege, if you like, for their loved ones at home. So I think there is a significant difference there.
Thank you, Kathy. Heather, have you?
Sure, I'd love to hear some more about the dowry trap and the price of marriage, those issues.
We have just a couple of minutes.
Yes, I will not be able to do justice to it, but I can tell you that several scores and scores of men living in Australia have that double jeopardy where false cases against them are lodged back home in India, misused, their entire families are jailed. Lots of extortion and blackmail happens. So unfortunately, when things turn sour-faced or pear-shaped, they've turned pear-shaped very, very badly. And we had man after man after man tell us how much pain and suffering they've gone through, not just themselves, as well as their families, because of some faulty laws that are in place overseas, which can still be enforced on people living in Australia. That is probably the crux of it.
Thank you, Manpreet. Can I make a final comment before I hand it over to Farouk? My final comment, Manpreet, you indicated education. I think that's the crux of the entire matter. If we can start educating our young boys, we start off in school, we start off in the home, respect for women folk. If we start doing that, we perhaps might not be able to see the major sort of change that we are looking at or thinking about next year or year after next or even in 5 years. But when these children that we teach respect grow up to be males in the society, we certainly will be able to see some differences from what is happening at the moment. So that's my final comment, and I'm very aware of the time, it's 8:27, so I'm going to hand it over to Farouk now, who's the Vice President of MIG, to finish off the session.
Good evening, and thank you very much for this inspiring evening, Manpreet and Ruby and everybody else. So once again, on behalf of Monash Interfaith Group, I would like to to thank the speakers tonight, Manpreet and Ruby, for this inspiring talks and discussions. And we have gained a lot from tonight, and I hope everybody else has gained so much insight and will pass on all this information to the rest of the community. I think the more people are aware of this problem, the better off we are. And it would empower women and men together. So thank you so much for that. I also would like to say thank you, Kamala, for conducting this Q&A section so competently and beautifully. And I would like to thank also the organizing committee for making tonight's forum possible and making it happen. Thank you very much. And thanks also to Monash City Council for their continuous support throughout the year. And also thank Pamela, the Monash Multicultural Officer, for the initial insight into this subject. And finally, and most importantly, I would like to extend my big thank you to everybody who participated in tonight's session and make it this enjoyable evening. So, and we are hoping that you participate in our future forums that probably we will have on different subjects as well as this subject maybe. So just a reminder that I just need to, that I would like you to fill in that survey that Heather was going to send to you, and please return it back to Heather for our next organizing sessions that we might have. Another point is we would like you to give your permission to us to take a few photos for our website at this point. If you're interested, please turn on your cameras so we can take the shot. Thank you so much for that. And we hope to see you soon and have a good night.